Hi everyone, thanks so much for listening to another episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm Vic Cundiff and I'll be your host for the show. Before we bring on tonight's guest, if you've had a Dogman encounter and would like to speak with me about it, whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you. If you've had a Sasquatch sighting and would like to be a guest on Bigfoot Eyewitness Radio, please go to bigfooteyewitness.com and submit a report. All right, let's bring on tonight's guest. Tonight's guest is Christian MacLeod. Christian, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Vic. It's an honor and a privilege, sir.
Oh, it's great having you here. Thank you so much for your time.
Anytime is good to be here, so whenever I can be here, I would love to.
Well, that's great news. Like I said, I'm so glad that you're here. Christian, unlike most eyewitnesses who come on the show, not only have you seen dogmen, you also had your own paranormal research group. Please tell us about yourself first, and then tell us about your research group.
Well, my name's Christian MacLeod. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and I am the director of the Asheville Cryptid Society, and we do both paranormal and cryptid research. I usually work with two other people, a guy named Tiny. His real name's Daniel Hurst, and he is the founder and lead investigator of M&D Paranormal. And the other person we work with is a woman named Slim, and she runs her own little woo-woo section called Blue Red. So what we do is we take perspectives from three different ways of looking at things, specifically, scientific method ways of doing things. And we look at all this information we get, we put it together, and then we come up with what we think the outlying issue may or may not be.
As the listeners are going to find out tonight, you're a very impressive guy, Christian. I'm really impressed at your ability to research things and get to the bottom of things.
Well, Vic, thank you for saying that, but we work very hard on all our cases, and we do a lot of research. For example, the last Dogman sighting we had was on a farm. It wasn't too far from what we would call the outskirts of town, and we just ended up going through all the deeds, all the information on the property. The owners gave us all the information about them, and we actually found out that there might have been some Cherokee folklore tie-in with what they saw. And, we take all that information and we put it together and we just present it to them and say, here, this is what we found. And then they'll ask us, of course, well, how do we deal with it? And, the truth of the matter is, Vic, we tell them point blank, if it's not really doing anything, if it's not bothering you, you're better off just leaving it alone. And that's kind of how we do things. Again, if it was an issue or if something was missing or if things were being hurt, I would suggest putting up lights or maybe, cutting down some foliage and leaving less coverage between the buildings and like the wood line. But for the most part, I don't think we've ever been able to tell anyone, hey, best thing to do is shoot at something. I mean, we just don't do that. We give them advice, maybe put some ammonia around the property, maybe some sulfur just to deter it, things like that. So what we do is when we go in, we get the report, we get all their information, and we try to correlate it with the history of the property to see if there was other sightings or other reports or things that might have happened there of a violent nature. So if we can rule out paranormal and we can just go to corporeal or like a real living creature or cryptid, then that helps us out too. It makes things a lot easier for us.
There's no future in shooting at dogmen. There's no debate about that. So I'm so glad you tell people not to do that.
Well, again, I've said this before. I'm in the no-kill branch of cryptozoology. I don't think there's any need to kill anything unless, again, your life is in danger, and even then you're probably better off just shooting a couple rounds in the air and running or trying to get out of there as fast as possible. Again, and when I say running, I don't mean turn tail and run because, again, that might set off the predator instinct, but getting out of an area that's considered hostile as quickly as possible. I think shooting a few rounds in the air would probably give you the time to do that. I think these creatures are smart enough to know what a weapon can do. And if they hear that noise, that'll probably scare them enough to just give you enough time to ease on out of that area. So that's what I always recommend that people do. Again, we don't recommend shooting at anything, specifically anything you don't know what it is. So we try to keep everyone calm when it comes to something like that, because a lot of people, they don't know what it is. They get scared. The first thing they're doing is they're going to shoot at it. It's an instinct. So we try to convince people not to do something like that. Maybe turn on all the lights, maybe put up some extra bright LEDs, light up your backyard like a baseball stadium. That seems to do a really good job. So that's what we usually recommend, something like that.
That all sounds like really good advice to me. Of all the cryptid sightings your group researches, what % of them would you say involve dogmen?
Again, Vic, where we live, I'm not far away from the Appalachian Trail at all. So I think that's a correlation. I'd say it's about 50-50, 50% Bigfoot, 50% Sasquatch. We do get calls every once in a while for like a pukwudgie or a water spirit or something like that. But 9 times out of 10, it's either going to be a dogman or a Bigfoot. And a lot of people don't know what dogman is. So they'll say, I've got this huge wolf, and we've seen this huge black wolf 5 or 7 times. And this huge wolf is getting into the livestock, or it's breaking into the garage, or it's taking sweet feed, or it's doing this, or it's harassing some of the farm animals or the livestock. They never come out and say it's a werewolf, and I don't want to lead anyone. I'd say, what does it look like? Well, it's huge and it's black. Well, how huge? I mean, if it's on all fours, how high would its shoulder be? 4 or 5 foot off the ground? Is it walking strangely? And I don't want to lead them. I don't want to give them leading questions, but I'm trying to get them to tell me exactly what they've seen. And a lot of people, Vic, aren't going to come out and say, hey, by the way, I saw this 9-foot black werewolf running 50 miles an hour across my street, hop over a fence and duck into the woods. They're not going to openly say that, because they're going to be labeled insane. People think you're crazy. That doesn't happen. And unfortunately, the truth of the matter is it does happen. And it happens a lot more frequently than I think any one of us wants to admit.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah, a lot more than most people would be comfortable with if they knew. Do you wish a higher percentage of dogman sightings came in, or would you rather investigate Sasquatch sightings?
I have to be honest with you. I love Sasquatch. I love Bigfoot. I've never seen him as far as like just a blatant, there he is, no questions about it. I've seen what I think was him several times, but just in blurs and tree knocks, hearing things, stuff like that. But the truth of the matter is, I think Dogman is he's like the new thing. He's the new cryptid. And I get excited when I start hearing Dogman stuff, because, there's so much we don't know. We've found very few tracks of like legitimate tracks of what I would consider Dogman. And we have found him. But the problem is we've never casted him because we didn't have the material, or the area was just too wet, or things like that. So there's that excitement about maybe finding something new with the Dogman that we can keep as evidence or just share with everyone. You know what I'm saying? So I do get excited by Dogman encounters, simply because there's not that much evidence of their existence, and we don't know as much about them as we know, say, about Bigfoot. Like Bigfoot, everyone's been dealing with Bigfoot for years. Dogman's just come around recently. So there's not as much information. So I do get excited with either call, but I think it's kind of cooler when we get like a real good Dogman lead, simply because, there's an opportunity maybe to get like a real good track, or take some measurements, or maybe get some claw indication, or just, anything, some hair, anything. So that's kind of my answer on that. I don't want to not be excited about a Bigfoot sighting, but when you get a Dogman sighting, that's kind of cool.
Well, I guess it comes as no surprise that I totally understand you feeling that way.
Well, like I said, I've seen Dogman, so I know he exists. And once you see something like that, you can't unsee it. So I guess there's that innate force in you, or a human being, once they see something, they want to prove it to themselves again and everyone else. So I guess I'm a victim of that. And my team they're pretty much the same way. They've all had different encounters. They've all seen different things, but it gives you that desire and that urge just to keep going forward. We all have regular jobs. I'm married to the greatest lady on the planet. She allows me to do as much cryptid research as I want. I mean, she's beautiful, she's brilliant, and she's patient. So I'm just such a lucky guy. A lot of crypto researchers, they don't have that ability. If they want it, they've got a choice. They can either go spend the weekend at home or go do research. But if the research becomes too much, then they're going to have home issues. So I've been blessed in the fact that my wife allows me to do what I want. I always clear it with her, of course, but I get very little friction. So that allows me to do that. And my team they're lucky in that same way as well, because their better halves allow them to do that as well. So we're lucky to have that time that we can spend after work and on the weekends and on holidays to go do our research. And if we're not researching, we're going over the evidence that we've already compiled. So we're very busy people, but we all make time for this. And it's because we love the subject matter so much that we do that. And I know you totally understand that. I mean, you're doing 2 shows by yourself, and that is not easy.
You mean we don't just show up and record shows and then after that close up the computer and go have fun? We actually put more work into it than that? That'd be nice. All right, Christian, you've got several sightings to share with us tonight. Please do that now. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
Well, the first time I saw a Dogman, was the first time I had a crystal clear concept of what a cryptid was. My wife and I moved up to Asheville, and it was early summer, and we were driving up in the Parkway. Now, for those of you who don't know what the Parkway is, it's the Blue Ridge Parkway, and it is gorgeous, but it's also very long. It's got a lot of hills, goes through some mountains, and you lose radio signal, and our GPS does not work while driving in the Blue Ridge Parkway. So the real truth of the matter is I got incredibly lost. So my poor wife, she'd been dealing with us driving for 2 hours, so she fell asleep. So she's sleeping in the corner, and I'm driving up this hill, and I'm going real slow because it's a real sharp turn. And I look down, and about 35 feet away from me in this embankment, the only way I can describe this, it was a black werewolf. It was massive. It was all black. It had these piercing green-yellow eyes that were just, it was 100% aware of everything around it. You could just tell, it was on. It knew exactly what was going on, and everything around it, it knew what was around it. It was just completely in tune to its environment. And I almost just drove off the road because I'm looking down and I see this huge creature, and he's sitting. It's either a stump or a rock, but he's got his arms in front of him, and he's got his legs he's sitting like a regular dog, but he's just massive. I can't describe how muscular this creature was. It was just huge, and it was all black. It was jet black. And like I said, I'm slowing down. I made eye contact with this thing. It looked at me for 5-7 seconds. And then I guess a bumblebee or a little bug was flying around it, and it just started moving its head kind of like a little puppy does. And it's just looking around. And Vic, I tell you, the thing that just still to this day baffles me, this creature could have cared less that I was there. There was absolutely no concern about me being there. I mean, this thing was so big. If it wanted to jump off of that thing, knock my car off the road and rip the doors off, it could have done that without a problem. That's how big this thing was, and it would have taken absolutely no effort, none whatsoever. So I was just stunned, but I don't even know how to explain it. I was just awestruck because I actually saw this thing, and it's real, and I didn't know what to do. I just kept driving, and I didn't tell my wife about that for probably 2 years because I didn't think she believed me. She probably thought I was seeing something. My wife's a very logical person. She's brilliant. She's just very scientifically orientated. And, she was well, it could have been this, could have been this, could have been this, couldn't have been that. So, I just kept it to myself, but it reignited my passion for cryptid research. I've been studying Bigfoot, and every once in a while I go research something, but I've been letting it slide for a while. But after that incident occurred, it just kind of got everything going again. And that's one of the reasons why I started the Asheville Cryptid Society. In our last interview, we talked about the influence of a dear friend of mine, Joshua P. Warren, but I talked to him about this too. And he's like, just go ahead, start doing more research. And that's what we did. We started Asheville Cryptid Society. And from that, we started Cryptid Guy. And then, like I said, through time, I was able to just fall in with the right people and the right team. And that was Tiny and Slim. So we've been doing a lot of research since then. And another one of the great things about doing research with other people is you can spread the work out. In other words, if we get a contact or we get a lead on something, Tiny does all the research on the area. I do the research on the people, and Slim kind of does gets the investigative photography down. So it's a lot easier because you get to split up the work. And that first case on the Parkway, that's kind of what started the whole bowl of wax rolling for me again, is that just incident, because I can still see that thing in my head. And it was like a huge puppy. I mean, it just didn't care I was there. It made eye contact with me. I think it assessed that was absolutely no threat. It could have cared less. It didn't even move. It was just moving its head back and forth, looking at this little bumblebee or moth or whatever it was. So that's still just ingrained in me. And that was the first time I'd ever seen like a cryptid 100% just right there. The next Dogman sighting we had, I was with Tiny, and we were deep. I mean, we're probably 7 miles in on this piece of property that we think at one point in time had been Cherokee land, but we weren't sure. It was scheduled to be forest cut down, and for some reason it didn't. For some reason it was spared being cut down. And we had gotten a couple of reports in there, and this gentleman had been hunting in there since he was a little kid with his dad, and he was he's probably pushing 65 now. So he had known this area his whole life. And he got in touch with Tiny about seeing some strange things in there. So we decided to go check it out. And Tiny and I, we get there and we park. And it was a long hike into this place. And it was on a narrow path, and it was just hot. I mean, it's, I believe it was in July. It was just hot, and we're just walking through this treacherous. I mean, it was just plants, trees, grass everywhere. It was real small path. It was just real deep foliage. And we get in about 3.5 miles, and there's this huge clear area, and it looked like a natural amphitheater. Like the top of this cliff on the top was like just completely flat, and there was nothing on top of it. But it was like this amphitheater just in the middle of the woods. I mean, it was a natural occurring, it was all out of rock, but it had a stream. It was very, very beautiful, very peaceful, very nice. And Tiny and I just take a break there, and we're just looking at it. We're just taking pictures. Again, I always use an EM meter, and just for kids, I'm taking readings, and there's nothing going on. Well, this is where it gets a little weird, and I'm just going to tell you this because this is how it all happened. Tiny looks on top of what we're calling the amphitheater, and it's basically just this big cliff, maybe about 75 feet tall. And he keeps looking up there, and I'm like, what? And he goes, do you see that? And I said, what are you talking about? There's nothing up there. And he goes, no, look right there by that tree. And he points. And the only way I can describe this is if anyone, I'm sure everyone's seen the movie Predator. It just had that Predator, like everything was the light was bending off of it. And when I first saw it, I'm like, what is that? That can't be real. That's a reflection off of something. That can't be, that's impossible. And then both Tiny and I saw it move and then go back into the tree line on top of that cliff. So we're just sitting there completely baffled. Neither one of us has ever experienced anything like that. Had no idea what it was. Completely awestruck. Sitting there going, what is that? That couldn't have happened. So we're sitting there, maybe 15, 20 minutes goes by, and we decide, let's just keep going because that couldn't have happened. So we keep going, and again, we're going through this real narrow path, and it comes upon the side of like a cliff, and I look down, and like on the bottom part of the cliff, before there's a drop, there looks like the first 3/4 of a huge canine track. And then I look over, and like on the base other side of the cliff, you could see like scratch marks where something had just jumped off of there and just used it for grip. And it looked like it had jumped on a tree and then gone down. So we saw that, and I was like, well, that's pretty impressive. So we took some pictures of that, and we just kept going in. And then about 2.5, 3 more miles in, we came upon this huge clearing. It was just huge, just like a huge circle. And there was nothing there. There was a cliff with little waterfall. There was a little stream. There was a bunch of wooden X's, like there were 7 or 8 wooden X's of various sizes and different rock formations. But it also looked like people had been camping there because it was like an old circle, a rock circle, and you could see like charcoal in there. And, it hadn't been used probably in a year or two. I'm just guessing. And that is where Tiny wanted to do some paranormal work. So when he does that, I usually leave him alone because he goes into his little state and he does things. So he's sitting there in the corner, And again, it's our belief this is all Cherokee land. So Tiny brings an offering of tobacco and he puts it down and, he starts talking to the paranormal stuff. And I'm going around this whole time and I'm taking pictures and I'm looking for evidence. And again, this place is pristine. It's just gorgeous. And maybe 15, 20 minutes goes by. And then I walk back up to Tiny, and where Tiny's facing, he's facing up this hill. And to his right, there's a tree line. And it's a lot more steep, like it goes almost to a cliff. Well, about 60 yards out, maybe 60 to 70 yards out, I thought I saw something out of the corner of my eye, but I'm thinking that it couldn't have been anything because there was movement and then there was no movement. And the lighting was such that I couldn't really see in there. And the way this hill was, there was just no way I was going to be able to climb that. I mean, it was just too steep. So I sit there and I'm talking to Tiny. He's packing his stuff up. And then we hear this snap, like a loud snap. And then we hear like this, I don't want to call it growl or a roar, but we heard like this, it was like a guttural noise, like, Rrr. It could have been like the beginning of a lion's roar. It kind of sounded like that, just not as, I don't know, not as much bass. It's just very difficult for me to explain. And I look back up to where I thought I'd seen something, and then I see that same movement. Well, when I do that, Tiny sees the same thing. And what it looked like I definitely saw the shape of what looked like to me like a huge wolf's head, because I saw the ears pointed up. And then when we both looked up there, you could see what it was ever on the head just went down. And then it was like holding the side of this huge tree. And I'll tell you something, when we saw exactly what that was, when we were able to make out that image, we got a little nervous at that point. We were trying to take pictures. I had the GoPro. I was trying to take pictures. It just, unfortunately, it was just a blob squatch. But we tried taking as many pictures as we could, but we backed out of there pretty slowly. And the whole time we were going back to our cars, we felt like we were being watched. We'd hear stuff. We'd be walking in an area and we'd hear birds, and all of a sudden everything would go quiet. It was things like that, the normal stuff that says, hey, there's something else there. There's a alpha predator in the woods and you best get going. All that stuff that usually you hear about, that was going on at that point in time. So Tiny and I were like a little nervous at that point. So we just decided, we'd take as many pictures as we could and just start walking out. Well, the entire time we're walking out, like I said, I felt like we were being escorted out. And by the time we got back to the cars, right when we're basically loading our gear back into the truck, I heard this incredibly loud tree knock. It sounded like a Louisville Slugger getting hit. I mean, it was just huge. And about 10 seconds later, we heard another one. So we were leaving anyway. So we got out of there. We have actually rescheduled to revisit that area in June. So hopefully there'll be some new evidence out there. Maybe we can get some better skills with the photography going and get some better evidence. But that was an interesting place. Very, very mystical. It was a very mystical place. Just the way the geological formations were just kind of incredible, because you're going in, you can barely see this path, and then all of a sudden it opens up, and it looked like a natural amphitheater. It was huge. So it's just a real cool place. So we definitely will be going back there again. But I'm a firm believer that there's no doubt in my mind that was a Dogman, and I think it was just hiding between two trees. So we saw the tracks, and I did make out that shape, and Tiny saw it too. So I'm pretty much convinced that was definitely a Dogman. And then the third encounter we had, Tiny and I got a tip about this area that was a little further out than we go. And we were I think we drove 9 miles in, and then there was a dirt road that was another 4 miles, and then there was a little trailhead. So we started out there, and let me tell you something. We had no signal on the phones. Either one of the car stereos was getting signal. I mean, this is the middle of nowhere. So we were pretty careful. We made sure we had water and stuff with us. And, this was just a path that it was one of those days where it was like hot, even in the mountains. The sun wasn't beating down, but it was hot. It was humid. There was a lot of bugs. Had to keep putting deep woods off on. It was just one of those days where, and every 20 minutes, one of us is stopping to either take a drink or just relax a little bit. It was just, what I'm saying? It was just one of those days where it was nice to be out, but then we had been out too long. So I was like, all right, we'll turn around, go back. And this terrain was just incredibly rough. There was barbs and everything. I mean, we were getting stuck with everything. We're getting bitten. I mean, it was nasty. And on the way back, I started feeling like something was pacing us, because we would stop and then we'd hear something else stop. And, you get a lot of that sightings with Bigfoot. You hear that people are pacing you. And I think it's rare to hear a dogman in the woods because they're just so adept to being quiet. But I think that's one of those cases where it might have been a young one. I don't know. And we just kept going. And again, it's getting later and later, and we're getting closer to leaving. And as we're looking over and we're just taking some final pictures out, about 60 or 70 yards away, I'm looking out at the whole area, and I'm taking like just last pictures and just this whole thing. I look out, and like some of the light comes behind something and like makes this canid head very visible, except you could see where it's got, I'm going to say it was his right arm kind of in front of a tree, and it's leaning out. And the only reason why I saw the detail is because the sunlight was behind it, giving it a silhouette. You know what I'm saying? So we saw that, and I'm pointing that to Tiny, and he saw it too. And we were just like, well, I guess we're not alone. We definitely saw something. And what I think it was doing is I think it was circling us. And I think it was going in front of us, then behind us, then in front of us and behind us. That's what I think it was doing. And it ended up over there. I mean, it kept its distance, but I mean, it was a big animal. I mean, it was a big creature, but I mean, I'd probably say it was probably 7 foot. And again, I didn't see the musculature size. I just got the outline, and I'm guessing it was about that high just from the way it was standing next to the tree. But I mean, it was definitely eyeballing us. I mean, and like I said, it's my belief that the whole thing had been circling us all the way around. So that was the last time Tiny and I actually did an investigation where we saw something. I mean, and we know it was a dogman just from the way the outline was. I mean, could it have been something else? Of course. Do I think it was anything else? No, because just the way we felt and the way things were happening. And again, we all know that certain creatures will circle what they're following. So I think that's definitely what happened to us out there. And that's another place we're definitely going to be going back to in the summer. So to be continued. The last Dogman report I've got, this one came to me third hand, but it's such a good story. I always like telling it. And it takes place on the Blue Ridge Parkway, and it involves a minivan, and a family that's on vacation, and a park officer. And allegedly what had happened is this minivan had stopped to take a picture, and it's almost dusk. It's dusky dark. They had stopped to take a picture on this cliffside, and something attacked the van. So they go taking off. Now remember, they're not from this area. They don't know where they're going. They're just going as far away as they can to get away from this thing. Well, one of the park rangers sees them and pulls them over. And they pull over. And the second the police officer sees them, the woman's got her ID and her driver's license, and she just says, "Listen, something attacked our van. We just need to go. Let's just go. I want to get out of here. I don't want to deal with this." And you're dealing with a police officer. He's going to be like, "Well, let me see how fast I can go here." He's still giving them a ticket. So he's going to run them. He's going to write them up. This isn't going to take 2 minutes. Well, he gets back into his cruiser, and he looks in the rearview mirror, and he sees this image coming closer and closer to him. And he hears the woman scream, and then the van takes off. Well, when the van takes off, he sees what's actually behind him about 20 yards, and he grabs his shotgun, and he goes out, and he sees this massive, for lack of a better vernacular, werewolf jump over the side of the railing, and it's gone. So he's not going to mess with this thing. He gets back in his car, and he's reporting that there's a huge bear running on the parkway. Well, the car gets attacked on the passenger side, And whatever this was, bear, Dogman, ripped off the front fender and threw it off the side, and then started attacking the car, just clawing it up and smashing the window. And apparently, from what I was told, it came about 6 inches from biting this guy in the face because it was trying to go through. And the only reason why it left is because he was able to unbreak his shotgun again and just pull the trigger, and he sent around through the roof. So about 20 minutes after this whole incident happens, the guy that told me this story, he shows up, and he told me that this guy was freaking out. Like, he was a 25-year vet. He'd been freaking. This was just something that didn't happen. And his boss goes and asks him how big the bear was and where did it go and did he shoot it? Well, he starts to tell him the whole story. And again, his boss goes, how big was the bear? And he just kind of had a little meltdown right there. So they just took him home and left his car. And from what I was told, the cruiser that had the damage on it was repaired within 2 days. So that's just, again, this is like third-hand story, but I always love that because it shows you the power and strength of these animals. So I've always been impressed with that story. And I know everyone's heard a story like that before, specifically with Dogman or something like that. But again, I always like that because it gives a good example of what these creatures could do if they really wanted to. And again, that's why I like it, because, this thing attacks a van, and I'm sure there was a reason for it. And then it starts running after it, and it goes down the road, and it's still either got its scent or whatever, and it still manages to catch up with it. I mean, it's just fascinating to think that something can do that. And again, I don't deal in conspiracies. This wasn't a conspiracy story. This is like a third party story. And like I said, the reason why I tell it is because it gives a good example of what I believe these creatures can do. And the truth of the matter is, I actually believe this story, Vic. I do. I believe it. I believe it happened.
Well, if you believe it, I do too. I know you don't just throw caution to the wind and believe everything you're told, so yeah, that means a lot to me. Before we move on, Christian, I want to share 2 things with the listeners. First of all, Christian was my guest on Tuesday night's episode of Bigfoot Eyewitness Radio, episode 160. It should come as no surprise, but he did a great job on that show too. But to listen to that episode or others, please go to bigfooteyewitness.com/podcast for instructions on how to listen. I also want to mention I'm going to air a special bonus episode of Dogman Encounters titled A Dogman Came Into the House With Us sometime in the next week. If you're subscribed to the show, you'll be notified when that episode's released. Alright, Christian, now that we've got all that out of the way, please describe what the Dogman you saw from the Parkway looked like for us as accurately as you can from top to bottom.
Vic, you gotta remember, I was driving in a car about 35 miles an hour and I looked down this embankment, and there is this massive black, for lack of a better word, werewolf. And it is just huge. It had huge ears. Its muzzle wasn't huge. It was big. I did not see any teeth. I saw, how you hear these reports of, well, their teeth protrude and you can say, I never saw one tooth. That never happened. It had these greenish yellow eyes, and it looked at me. It made eye contact with me, and it was just, its head was moving like a puppy. It was like looking at everything around it. And was just so, you could just tell it was aware of everything around it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it just knew. And the size of this thing was just, it was muscular, like a comic book villain. It was that big. It had that kind of muscle mass on it. It was just huge. And its arms were just right in front of it. And its legs were just sitting like a dog would normally sit. I did not see a tail. I didn't see hands. Like I did, I just saw from like the wrist up and probably the knees up. It was just massive. But again, I had to be honest with you. And it had a chest. I mean, it had a chest. You could see all the muscle. It was just huge. But the truth of the matter is, everyone calls this guy like the crypto terrorist, or he's the scary one. He just likes to scare you. I was scared just because of what I was looking at, but I didn't feel like it wanted to do me any harm. You know what I mean? It was there. Now, I'm not going to stop the car and go out and try and pet it, but it was there. And again, if it wanted to do me harm, it very well could have. But it was just, people always compare. I've talked to a lot of witnesses that compare him to the Van Helsing movie. And I can see that, but not, it was bigger muscular wise. And again, I didn't see any teeth. but it had that same kind of not Doberman, that German Shepherd look, that kind of profile, but it was just all black and it was just massive. And again, it's just one of those things where you see it and you just still can't believe you saw it. And it changes your mindset on what's really out there, because, you grow up and you say, okay, this is what's out there and there's nothing to worry about. There's no real monsters. And then one day you're driving down the road and all of a sudden you see something that's basically, I don't want to use the word monster in a derogatory way, but there's a real life werewolf right there. So, I mean, that's the best description I can give you on that. It was just huge, massive, black. Its ears twitched like when the bugs there was gnats around it, I'm guessing, because its ears kept twitching. Like, how dogs do when the bugs are around. And it was just, honestly, to me, it just looked like it was chilling out. But I would have liked to have seen its hands and its teeth, but I just didn't. I mean, there was no aggressiveness on this creature's part at all. So, again, I don't think it paid me any mind because it could have just cared less. That's the impression I got.
Oh, of course it changes your paradigm. There's life before you see a dogman and life after.
And then you start doing all the research about, okay, what is this thing? Is it a cynocephali? Is it something that's been around forever? Why are we just seeing so many of them now? And, I have a theory. I told you about this when we were talking about on the Bigfoot pre-interview. I have a theory that Sasquatch was always North American, or the North American primate, as I like to call him, was here. And then when the Europeans came and we brought smallpox will transfer to a great ape. If people want to look that up, there's a book called Pax Americana that talks about how that happens. And I think that's why the Sasquatch probably depleted so much, is because, smallpox was killing everyone and it probably wiped out a great many of them. And then, what's to say it couldn't have affected, the Dogman in some way. It could have jumped there and maybe that wiped out part of their population. And with all the industry and everything we brought into this country, we still have these massive tracts of land that haven't even been touched. They're still underdeveloped. Nothing's happened to them. So I think they still have plenty of hunting grounds and breeding grounds and things like that. And the other thing is, when we go ahead and clear cut for wood and things of that nature, what we've done is we've opened up all this new land for grass to grow. Well, and it goes back to the food chain, deer eat grass. There's more deer. There's more grass. So, there's more food supply for these cryptids. And I think that's part of how this whole thing started and is working out right now. And I think that's why we're having so many sightings. I don't think it's necessarily because we're encroaching so much on their land, because they have all this massive amount of forest and stuff all over this country and in North America, South America, so I just personally think there's more of them now. And that's why we're having so many sightings.
You've got a bad habit of making a lot of sense with the things you say. Do you know that, Christian?
I try not to, Vic. I'm sorry. I wish my wife would say that to me.
Oh, I'll bet. When you're looking at those 3 dogmen, what percentage of you would you say was a researcher, and what percentage of you would you say was a stunned eyewitness?
The first one, 100% stunned. 100% stunned. The second one, 90% stunned. And the third one, probably 80% stunned. But I was trying to take pictures and it just wasn't working. At that time, all we had, we just brought our phones with us and we were taking pictures with those because those are the easiest to carry. And usually they take great pictures. And it was one of those things where we weren't really expecting to find anything. It was just one of those, let's go check this area out and see what it looks like thing. But, I mean, even to this day, when I see a footprint or something in the ground, I get giddy. It's like, oh God, here we go. Yes, yes, yes. So, I mean, we all get excited. It's just one of those things where I don't think you're ever going to be 100% on the research side of something when you see it, because you're just that shock, that marvel you're studying and looking at. That's something that's not supposed to be there. That's still always going to put you in a little state of being stunned. So I don't think you'll ever go into 100% research mode. And anyone that says, oh, I would do this or I would do that, it's like, all right, I'll tell you what, why don't you come with me and I will take you into these dark, deep forests where your technology is not going to work. You're not going to have signal. You're not going to have the ability to call 911. Your radio's not going to work in your car because you're so far out. And I will take you to this place. And in this place, I will show you things that will just twist your reality. And then in there, you'll understand why it's not going to be so easy to take a picture if you come upon one of these cryptids. And that's what I always tell people, because you can go ahead and say, oh, I do this, I do that. That's nice in theory, but application's a whole different ballgame when you're in their domain.
Oh, sure. If you are 100% researcher when you have a sighting of a dogman, I don't think you should be out there researching them anyway.
No, because the common sense and the fear, you need those inherent abilities to have fear. And that fight or flight needs to be in you because you might have to get out of there. There could be an issue where you could get seriously injured or killed. You just never know. And that's why I always tell people, you've got to be careful. You always go with someone. You always have a plan. Again, GPS, firearm, and a partner, and you're probably going to be all right.
Well, as you know, wildlife photographers, they get hurt all the time because they lose sight of the fact that there's more to their situation than what they see through that lens. They're there. It's real.
I talked to a National Geographic photographer about 20 years ago. He's a real cool guy. And he was doing some stuff in the Everglades, and he was taking pictures of alligators. And he got hit by an alligator's tail. And he had to get like back surgery, and they put like these electronic diodes or something in his back so he could walk or something like that. I mean, it was just some kind of crazy surgery. But I asked him, so what were you doing so close to him? And he told me, he goes, I completely lost sight of the fact that I was in a wild animal's domain. And you can't do that.
Oh, sure, it happens all the time. Do you treat investigations that involve dogmen differently than you would, say, a Sasquatch sighting?
No, we treat every investigation the same. It's completely confidential. We use the scientific method. We get as much information as possible. We collect as much evidence as possible. And then we all get together, we go over it, and we try to search out what we think it is. And we go from there. And then we present that to either the owner of the property or the complainant that's called in and said, hey, I need help. And you know what else? We don't charge either. That's something I like to tell. If someone calls and they've got a problem, we just show up and we help. We don't charge. There's no need for it. If we can help you, great. If we can't, then we'll try and find someone that can help you. And that's a great thing about dealing with Tiny, because Tiny has the same philosophy when he goes in for paranormal stuff. Like, he doesn't charge. He wants to help people. And that's what we want to do. We want to help people. We want to gain knowledge through research so we can help more people. And that's what we really choose to do. And that's what I think we're such a good team. Because, realistically, Vic, paranormal investigators and cryptid investigators usually don't get along. I'd say we're probably a very lucky group of people to have found each other and have the same interests, even though they're so far across the spectrum. Like I said, we've got the woo-woo, we've got the paranormal, and then we've got the cryptid. So like I said, I'm just a very lucky guy.
It sure sounds like it. Okay, Christian, I hope you're sitting down because I've got a juicy question for you. Why do you think there's so much reluctance from the public, including Sasquatch enthusiasts, to accept the fact that dogmen are a reality?
You know what? That's a great question, Vic. And here's what I think about that. And this is just my take. I think people become obsessed with specific entities. Again, paranormal investigators are obsessed with getting that perfect full body apparition or evidence that there's a ghost. Cryptozoology, let's face it, cryptozoology is a word that was used instead of Bigfoot hunter. That came around in the late 70s, early 80s. That was a buzzword. Instead of saying, well, I look for Bigfoot, I'm a cryptozoologist. All right. Now, cryptids are any unknown animal, primate. I even consider aliens cryptos. That's just me. That's how I classify them. So when someone says they're a cryptozoologist, they're looking at everything. It's not just Bigfoot. So I think when someone's so diehard that Dogman doesn't exist, it's just because they've put their entire thought process and energies into just looking for Bigfoot. And that's the only thing that can be there is just Bigfoot. There's nothing else out there in those woods we can't explain except the North American primate. And sooner or later, we'll get the government to admit that he's real and all this other stuff. And that's their mindset. And that's why they're so just focused on one specific cryptid, because they're not true cryptid researchers. They're just looking for one cryptid, and that's Bigfoot. And if you say to someone that's just a diehard Bigfoot hunter, or Bigfoot enthusiast that there's a Dogman. Well, no, there's not. Well, how do you know? Because there can't be. Because we would have heard more. We would have seen more. Well, Alexander the Great usually employed cynocephalized mercenaries to help fight his wars. And we're talking in the 300 plus BCs, 326 BC. So that predates us a little bit. So Native Americans have talked about Dogmen for hundreds of years. So I think it's just, they've been part of our culture. It's just everyone says, okay, that's not a Dogman. That's just a Bigfoot. It's another version of a Bigfoot. But I don't think Dogman is a Bigfoot at all. Everyone believes that the Beast of Seven Shoots is it's a type 3 Dogman. No, it's not. I think that's a Bigfoot with a muzzle. I don't think that's a Dogman at all. I think there's different types of Bigfoot. I think that specific picture is of a Genasqua. That's my personal take on that. And a Genasqua, as we all know, is a Bigfoot just with a different facial construction. So I think that's personally what that was. So I think Bigfoot's a completely separate entity than a Dogman. They're two different species, and whether they get along or they don't get along, I don't know. But I'm pretty much convinced they're different.
Christian, why'd you have to say the type 3s are a kind of Bigfoot? Are you trying to get me stirred up?
I'm trying. Is it working?
Well, yeah, a little bit, because, they're not. Sorry, but for some reason, the hair in the back of my neck stands up whenever I hear someone say that a type 3 is kind of Bigfoot. Now, I'm fully on board with your idea that a type 3 is not a type of quote-unquote Dogman. They're not a type of canid. Look at their leg structure. But to say that they're a Sasquatch, a kind of Sasquatch, that's also wrong. Don't know what they are, but I know what they're not. So, that's what I was getting at with all this. But having said that, I know you know about the murders that supposedly happened in the LBL. What are your opinions about the validity of those claims?
Well, I've read they had that report that was online about how the two police officers went and talked to that woman either at the restaurant or the shopping, or I was an IGA or something like that. And then I've listened. I'm a big fan of the Outlaws, as you know. So my opinion, I've read that, and then I've listened to Baron Kumbo, and they had, or they still have, that guy in their Outlaws that was a witness. He lived in that area when it happened. And when Baron Kumbo explained it, the way they explain it, I tend to believe it. And here's why, because I remember the early 80s, I remember Bear was talking about one of the reasons why he thinks it attacked is because that guy had so much cologne on. And to me, that makes sense, because that smell probably drove him nuts or something, or made him angry. And then he just went into attack mode, and he was probably hungry. And then, the aftermath sounds normal for an incident of that caliber. So I personally believe that I think probably something did happen there. And the other thing I look at is the fact that they went and changed that entire campground. They basically changed it completely. So I don't understand why they would do that unless they were trying to cover something up or something happened there and they didn't want to, have another issue with it. So I firmly believe that something did happen there. Whether or not it was a family of 4, I've heard it was a lawyer and it was his wife, and they lived in Florida and they were on vacation, and they drove up in this brand new Airstream and they were going on vacation. I've heard several variations on the origin story of this, but I don't think we're ever going to really know what happened. I think someone knows what happened, but as far as an incident happening there, I believe something did happen there.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think something did happen too. You host a podcast called Fringe Investigations. Please tell us more about your show and how we can listen to it.
If you go to YouTube and just type in Fringe Investigations, you'll pull up our podcast. And again, it's me. I'm the cryptid guy. Tiny is Tiny. And then Slim, of course, is Slim. And Slim looks at things from the woo-woo side of reality. I look at things from scientific method and from a cryptozoological point. And of course, Tiny looks at things from a paranormal point of view. And what we do is we'll look at a certain topic and we'll discuss it, and we all contribute our point of views from our particular background. And then we discuss, how is this specific incident or item critical to something that's on the fringe of reality? And we have a good time doing it. We were very lucky. In October, we were podcast of the month on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie. So again, we got real lucky. So we've been very blessed with our curriculum and how we do things and our subject matter. So go ahead, give it a listen, and subscribe if you want. We've got more coming out. We just finished another one today. We don't have out as many as we'd like right now, but again, anyone that does a podcast, it takes so much time to get one the right way and to make sure it's edited. And yeah, we always try to do like a G-rated show so, the kids can listen, and that just takes a long time to do it. And again, when you've got 3 people on 3 different schedules and everyone's working different schedules and you try to come together and find a time, everything has to come together right. And that's when we get one out. So, please give it a listen, subscribe, and tell us you like it. Really appreciate you bringing that up, Vic, too. Thank you very much.
Well, you're welcome. I mean, after all, you're doing big things and great things. I'm just glad to see so many good things are coming your way. You deserve it.
We try. We try very hard, and we put a lot of time and effort into everything we do. And again, our main focus is we want to help people. Again, we're not in this for the money. We understand we're never going to get rich. If I sell a couple T-shirts here and there and put some gas in the tank, that's great. If I don't, that's great. Tiny feels the same way. Slim feels the same way. We're in this to help people and just expand our knowledge base. So that's what we're really in this for. And I think that's the difference, because when people realize we just want to help, that's when they start getting real honest with you. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. Like I told you before, I really like the way you do things.
Well, thank you. That means a lot, especially coming from you, Vic. You're a pillar of this kind of community, and I think if we had more researchers and people with your values on how to talk about these stories and this information and want to help people, then I think the word cryptozoologist and investigator or cryptid investigator or Bigfoot investigator wouldn't be scoffed at so much. They'd be taking us more seriously.
Well, thanks for saying that, but I think you're giving me too much credit. I just try to help people Vic, the best I can.
You help a lot of people, and that's important. And it's my belief that's what we're here to do. We're here to help each other. And that's my team's belief, and we try to put that into everything we do.
Well, it shows. It definitely shows. If an eyewitness wants to report a sighting to you, how can they do that?
Vic, the best way to get in touch with me is to just email me at AshevilleCryptidSociety.com or AshevilleCryptidSociety@gmail.com, or they can call me at 828-782-3766 or 828-407-0046. Another good way to stay current on what we're doing is just go to www.fringeinvestigations.com, because we always keep that current. And again, they can also get in touch with me through cryptidguide.com. So it's real easy to get in touch with me. I have plenty of ways for it, and I've always got my phone on me, and those numbers go right to my phone, and so does that email. So if anyone needs to get in touch with me, that's the best way.
Well, that makes it easy. Before we get out of here, Christian, do you have any closing comments you'd like to share?
Vic, for everyone that's seen something, or they are ashamed of something they've seen, or they're scared to come out with it, don't be. The world's evolving. People are evolving. And, give me a call. I'll help you out if I can. And if I can't do it, I'll help you find someone that can. And one of my taglines, and this is something I use on everything, and I always end our shows with this, and I want to explain it real quick. Keep believing. Keep believing in what you're seeing and what you're doing, and keep believing in the person you want to be, because, you're going to get there. And if you've seen something and everyone tells you no, you couldn't have, believe in yourself. Just keep believing and do what you know is right, and always do the right thing. That's what I always like leaving people with.
If you've listened to this show and you're not impressed by what you've heard from this man, then I really don't know what it's going to take. Christian, like I've said before, I'm so impressed by you. Thanks so much for coming on the show. I really do appreciate it.
Well, you know what, Vic? Thank you so much for having me. If you would let me just say goodbye to my beautiful wife and my team, I would say good night, my friend. You're a gentleman and a scholar, and again, we appreciate you so much. Thank you so much, Vic.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks again so much. Have a great night. If you've had a Dogman encounter of your own and would like to speak with me, whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmenencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you.